So here we go. Right. So I've got a ton of links, but it's an exciting day. So this I thought was really pretty nice. There's a thing that calculates your COVID risk for common activities and your location and such, which I thought was very nice. And I was very pleased to observe that my intuition was entirely correct. For me, you choose your risk level, and you either, if a normal person that's young and healthy gets this one, somebody that's like old and fat like me gets this one. I thought it was very interesting. And so you can figure out, and as I thought, basically going out to a meal with my friends is totally pretty much off the table in this time of COVID, which is what I had figured. Anyway, this I think would help people more logically plan their risk, because people are bad at estimating the risk of a rare thing like that. Mm-hmm. And the governor of Utah has come out and made a statement that everyone must wear masks for 2 weeks, and they must stop associating with anybody outside their immediate family and all that jazz, which is very nice. And I'm very glad to see some governors actually take some realistic moves to protect people. And of course, the big thing now is Pfizer is now claiming that they have a vaccine that is 90% effective. And immediately this had a huge effect. People are amazed everywhere. Trump administration took credit for it, and then Pfizer immediately said, no, we did not get any money from Warp Speed. Trump does not deserve any credit for this. But anyway, regardless of that, this sounds great. And immediately Zoom stock fell because everyone said, oh, it's all over, we can just forget about it. And that's not true at all. This is based on like 94 cases. It's not even been peer reviewed yet. Even if all this is true and everything goes at maximum speed, it won't be available until the third quarter of next year. And, it's what it is. However, it is surprising because we were expecting a vaccine that was going to be like 50% effective, like the flu vaccine. And if we actually got one that was like 90% effective, then it would be the original plan where you could actually get a shot. And what that would do is it would lower you from the high risk to the low risk option here. You can now resume a lot of normal life. I don't think I'd resume hanging out in coffee houses, but I could probably like show up and teach a class face to face for an hour or two or something like that. And it would be an acceptable risk after a 90% effective vaccine. So that would be nice if all the good things happen. So anyway, it's going to raise Pfizer stock. And anyway,
all the stocks are up today except for like Amazon, which I think is interesting because typically the patterns have been if the incumbent doesn't get reelected, that there's more market uncertainty, but not in this case.
Well, yeah, it's been going up and down a lot because I think there's a huge uncertainty about what it means. I mean, the super rich got much richer under Trump.
Yeah.
And therefore the stock market goes up. And so, of course, a lot of other people do better under Biden, and some people are afraid he'll raise taxes, which is probably true. But now that McConnell's going to be in the Senate, he won't let him raise any taxes. So, I think if I was trying to predict, which way anything would go, I'd be pretty befuddled at this time.
Yeah.
I'd say there's still plenty of uncertainty.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Anyway, big steps forward on the COVID vaccine. And so then we've got these guys called the cops from their scams.
Call themselves. Yeah, typically if you're committing crime, it's best not to call the police on yourself. But that hasn't stopped lots of criminals, and this one's pretty amusing. It was just sort of a funny little story about how these cyber criminals called the actual cybercrime investigation branch of the police, which was awesome for the cops because they just went ahead and kind of strung them along, much like Kaitlyn does when she gets a scammer phone call, just to see how far it would go and to see what kind of techniques they were using. And then this was funny sort of envisioning this because I also watched another friend royally anger the scammers when they called one day because he's been working in tech for at least 20 years and worked at a big 10 computer manufacturer, and she gets this call and she puts him on speakerphone when I was over at her house one day, and the scammer's like, oh, there's a virus on your computer. And she starts off with, which one? I have 10. Is it one of the Macs or one of the Windows machines, or is it my Linux box? And the guy's like, And essentially the cops did the same thing. They were asked to go to this like Weebly site and install all the software, and they're just like, oh, we're having problems installing all the things you want us to install on our sandbox VM. And finally they frustrated them enough that the scammer hung up on them. But I just find these stories funny and entertaining.
And it's valuable to tell people because a lot of people fall for this stuff.
Yes, yes. So do not, if somebody calls you up and wants you to install a remote access utility on your computer, don't do it.
Yep, yep. All right. And let's encrypt. So this is more of the cert problems. This is yours, Irvin, I guess.
Yep, it's definitely the cert problem, since Let's Encrypt is using, or they're switching their ways. It's gonna affect old phones, and in this case, old Android phones.
And how old?
They'll start having issues with the root certificate, unless you're using Firefox.
Android prior to 7.1. That's not that old by my standards.
No, it's what, 4 versions now? Because we're on 11.
I think a lot of people are still running Android 4. I mean, anyway.
Yeah, so it's gonna hurt them. It'll be more of an annoyance, really.
Can you just install a new browser or something to get around?
Yeah. So if you're using something like Firefox, you'll be fine.
Oh, okay, fair enough. It's just the default browser won't work.
Right. The default browser won't work anymore. So if you have a pre-711 phone, use Firefox.
Actually, this is kind of answers another question from the last time we did this. Chrome wants to have their own encryption, their own certificate store, and I wondered why. And this is actually a pretty good reason, in case the OS one is no good.
Yeah, well, the browser one can take over and life continues.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. And Etherify.
Here's something really cool. So last weekend, I got a ham radio license, and just coincidentally, this hacking technique came up, which pretty much requires a lot of ham equipment. Basically, what you can do if you want to extract data from an air-gapped environment, you can change the switching speed on the Ethernet cable. And so you can change it from 10 base T to 100 base T, and that creates different frequencies essentially running through the wire, which of course you can then pick up with ham radio equipment and send out Morse code without even registering with the router or the DHCP server. Like if you have security to make sure that a device cannot connect to the network, it doesn't matter. You can still exfiltrate data just by changing the switching speed. But don't worry, if you can connect to the network and you can send data, you can just send data too, and that will create its own distinctive wave patterns that you can, once again, take out a ham radio and start exfiltrating data.
Yeah, this reminds me of one where you send out an ultrasonic sound from the transformer.
It's exactly, it's yes, similar to that. Like I've seen it done where you might have like a graphics card, and it can run at different frequencies depending on the power usage. So what you can do is you can have it run really fast to indicate a dot, and then slow down the frequency to indicate a slash and send out Morse code that way and stuff. So
yeah,
you can just do it with regular Ethernet cables, which all computers have. And you don't, like I said, you could all this equipment, all the Splunk in the world is not going to catch someone doing this. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, reminds me of the original Tempest, where they said, basically you need to be in like a locked room surrounded by a Faraday cage, or something's leaking out of there that you wish wasn't.
This is awesome.
Yeah. And I just saw a new one today where they say little Bluetooth earpieces do the same thing. They leak out radio signals. And,
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, if you have I imagine if you get one of those laser microphones, if you were to point that directly at a Bluetooth headset, you'd probably just get the audio right out of there. I mean,
I'm sure you would just from the sound vibrations.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, I was very impressed by the transition team. Alexander Ocasio-Cortez was interviewed, and a bunch of people are saying, you need to stop being like so liberal, you're ruining everything, that's why the Democrats are failing. And I liked her defense, which made me feel very much like my role in college teaching. She said, you know, the reason these people fail is that they're idiots and they're behind and don't use the internet. She said, all my super liberal friends in the squad got reelected with no problem because we have Facebook pages and Twitter pages and we appear on the internet and we promote ourselves. And all these people that failed spent like $5,000 in Facebook ads. Like, what are you talking about? You're like running a Stone Age campaign. And she said, when Obama won, Obama's victory was largely credited to his creative use of internet promotion, and he can do that inside the DNC. I heard DNC people complain that Obama didn't benefit the DNC. He formed an external agency and developed all of it outside the DNC because the Stone Age DNC wouldn't go along with it. And that's what I've done at the college, of course. You know, I years ago, I figured out that the college is basically never going to move. They're stuck in the past, and all my work has to be basically not using any college resources to get anything done. And I always felt like a lot of kinship with AOC because we're in a similar position, trying to do something new in a stodgy old framework that cannot adapt quickly. So anyway, that was her position. And so I'm very pleased, amazed at Biden's team. So Biden has formed a shadow government already. He's got plans to fight the coronavirus pandemic. He's already got a team of like 10 or 12 real doctors to plan everything. He's talked about how there's going to be a mask mandate and limited lockdowns and stuff immediately. And he's made a Twitter account for the presidential transition team to issue official statements, which I think is awesome. And they've made a Twitter account for their dogs. And this I think is what you do. And like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez says, went to play that game where you kill people live on Twitch to promote people voting. I mean, this is what you do. You use the internet effectively. So I'm very impressed. And the analysts I listen to are saying the reason Biden won is because he ran a really smart campaign and didn't screw up. Anyway, so I think this is really where it's at. I think you have to use the internet effectively. And it's so amazing to see like an intelligent person doing smart things in the White House. I sort of forgot that was possible. Instead of just, of course, it was this way in the Reagan years. You didn't even want to wake up and look at the newspaper. Every day it was some awful, false, horrible thing like trees cause air pollution or something. People think Trump is like the only guy that was this terrible, but actually we've had a lot of terrible people. But anyway, as you know, an educated person, I'm really glad to have this new team in there. I see him doing things smart and right. Like, you know, Trump said, if you put Biden in, he's going to listen to doctors and scientists, and that would be awful. And that's exactly what he's doing. And he responded on Twitter. He said, yes, which is just what happened. So I'm happy. Anyway, China had a hacking contest.
Yeah, this is kind of awesome. And they took, boy, these hackers, they took down a lot of systems. So they pwned all the things essentially. And I thought this was really cool. I'd like to know more about the specific exploits because they got some really cool stuff here. And I'd heard a little bit more about the Docker one over the weekend, but I haven't had a chance to dig into, to start digging into the rest of these. And they look pretty interesting, so.
The Docker and Key, I heard about a few of these. I didn't. Yeah. It's pretty awesome. And are all the exploit proof of concepts public or anything?
That's why I say I don't know. I've only had a chance to like look at the Docker one so far. So I want to do a little. This story just came out this morning, so I want to do a little more. I want to do a little more digging. Or I mean, just came out yesterday. I want to do a little more digging. But I think it's cool. It's a cool concept.
Yeah.
That they have these, you know, sort of giant national hacking competitions, and then, you know, they not only do they get some bug bounty money out of it, they get some recognition, and ideally we all get to know about these vulnerabilities so that we can fix them.
Yeah, I think it's great. I'm just sort of surprised the government doesn't conceal it and classify it and stuff.
Yeah, I think they're really. I think that DEF CON China, you know, really started to open up the doors to this stuff, and you know, I think it's a move in the right direction. and our government's been doing a little bit more of this too. The thing that springs to mind is like Hack the Pentagon and some of the DoD stuff where they realize, it's not that productive to just pretend it's not a problem and just, ignore it and hope it goes away. Instead, kind of to embrace it and bring it under their own purview. So there is maybe some control over it and you're incentivizing hackers to do it the right way and, to have permission and then, responsibly disclose these breaches that they find. So I think it's a great trend, and I hope to see more going in this direction.
Well, I hope we get to go to DEFCON China again, maybe in 2 years after we have a vaccine and maybe even a less hostile government towards China.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I do too. It was, we got to go the last couple of years, and it was such a cool event. Yeah, and I think it was new to that type of event was just so new in China, but it really, I think it may have opened a lot of doors. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And Apple CPU benchmark. The new Apple chip. Yeah.
Yes, the new Apple chip, the A14X, is beating the i9s.
Yeah. Well, that was the idea, right? And it's supposed
That was the idea, and it's definitely doing it. It has a base clock of 1.8, boostable to 3.1. I think it has 8 cores in it. It is definitely outpacing the i9.
That's why they say ARM is where it's all going. We're all going to move away from Intel, supposedly.
Right.
Well, I don't think that'll happen, but I'm wondering where they're manufacturing their chips. Like who's the fabricator?
I haven't heard that.
Making the ARM chips, you mean?
Yeah, who's making the ARM chips for Apple? Because Apple doesn't have the facilities; they have to outsource it.
I'm sure they do. Yeah.
So I'm wondering who's doing it, and why are they better than Intel?
Supposedly Samsung.
For years,
Okay,
they're supposed to be better than Intel because they're reduced instruction set. Therefore, the silicon is more optimized. I mean, that was the original plan of the original Motorola Apple, and apparently that is now favored by technology. Again, the huge instruction set is just a waste of silicon, I think.
But I mean, they did say, I remember reading at some point that they were going to start doing, manufacturing their own ARM chips. So I don't know.
Me too. I heard that, but I don't know where they're making it right now.
And then I see a conflicting source that says Taiwan Semiconductor is making them.
Well, then there may be some political issues, but but yeah. Anyway, I'd like to see it. I think I'm all for ARM. ARM assembler is more fun than Intel assembler. That's my concern. There may be some other trivial concerns like legacy software or something, but that's the one I care about.
Yeah.
Anyway, then we got Android TVs.
Yeah, TCL is one of the biggest TV manufacturers currently in the market, and their TVs come with Android installed, and it's really bad. It's not even just like normal, what would you expect? It's more like, what are all the things you could do bad, and put them all in a box and sell it to consumers. So to give you an idea about how bad it is, if you want to log in, it's just root. To get a shell, SSH, ADB, all that stuff's all open from the beginning. Root. So there you go. You're all in. They have a bunch of web services running where you can get access to the entire file system right off the bat. Change all the file stuff. You can basically do anything you want with these boxes. It's like I said, it's not just it's Android, and maybe if you look, you might find some bugs. It's just like they didn't even try.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. That's just so bad.
This reminds me of that File Explorer program that just served up all your files with no authentication, and did that for 2 years before anybody noticed.
Yeah.
Android is just such a steaming mess.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not even like Android's fault. I mean, there's nothing in Android that says you have to have like over a dozen ports open at a given time, serving up, ADB.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's not exactly Android's fault. It's just that they use it so badly.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Okay. All right, let's see, that's that one. So now we're down to my last one. Right. So anyway, I'm interested to watch the way the truth is vanishing here in America. And this video is very good. He talks about how like 30% of people now get their news from YouTube. And the YouTube algorithm, of course, just tries to get more clicks without regard to the truth, which is the problem. So this fake news proliferates, and it's interesting to watch people try to deal with it. So the GCHQ is now going to use their hacking team, the government hacking team, to hack anti-vax websites and take them down. So that is an interesting way to deal with it. That's one step. In America, they're talking about maybe having some kind of legislation limiting the way that Facebook and Twitter and YouTube can just promote misinformation. And of course, the Trump team claiming he still won the election, all their claims are just ridiculously false and immediately debunked. There weren't people having more than 100% turnout. There weren't a bunch of dead people voting and all these things, but people are proving them wrong. And anyway, I was very interested in this one. This is Sway, the new podcast. And this woman is a therapist who I think her parents were in the German concentration camps. And she talks about how to deal with these issues. And in particular, she talks about how to deal with, say, all your Trump friends and relatives. Like Kara Swisher's mom, and I think all of us have Trump friends who are like raving about Trump, and it's really hard to listen to them, and they're raising all these crazy things that you know are false. And she had some intelligent advice how to deal with it, which I thought was very good. Like she said, you know, and this is not new to me, because I grew up in a town where you had cult groups and stuff, and there were a lot of people that would hold some belief they wouldn't shut up about that was horrible. And what you do is you say, well, we still have some connection. Like, I would like you to be, if you needed help, I would help you. You know, we used to have this fun thing together. The thing to do is have a relationship based on something else, and don't talk about the thing you can't talk about. And I think I learned this partly when I was a caretaker for a handicapped guy for many years. And he was real troublesome. He would burn out his friends until they'd leave and not be his friends anymore. And I realized my job was to survive. So I had to like limit how much he took from me so I would still be there later. You know, and I think this is true of teachers. You have these needy students that just drive you nuts, like baby chicks begging for more all the time. And your job is to limit how much they take so you can stand them. And that way you're there later when they need you. So it looks like Liz just got nuked with their ISP. She's got this low-grade ISP. Anyway, so I highly recommend this thing. It seemed to me to have the most sensible practical advice, which I think a huge number of Americans now need, which is how are you going to stay friends with somebody who has a huge political divide?
I also want to point out it's okay to cut off friends who have very problematic views. Don't feel like you have to reach across the aisle all the time. There are people, one good life pro tip is to choose your friends wisely. And it's great if you have family members and you want to keep the family together. I mean, that's one thing, but I don't want people feeling pressured to, maintain relationships or reach across the aisle with people who might, hate them for their skin color. I mean, that's not fair.
Right.
Well, you certainly have the right to cut off relations with people, but I hate to see it done over politics, because in fact, politics is pretty much just a fashion choice for most people. Even though they rave about repeating something they saw in the news, they don't really believe it. And then when it goes out of fashion, they will forget that they ever held this ridiculous view. That's why, I think politics is not as deep as people think it is. I don't think religion is either.
Yeah, I used to think it was more so than I do now. I used to think that it was more like people believe every bit of what they're saying, but I don't think so. And that's partly why it can be so dangerous when you have somebody in a position of power that's advocating for doing sexist, racist, horrible things.
Well, this is why I think about like animals, your relationship with your dogs and your pets like Ginger. I mean, this is why my dad used to say something which I found frustrating. When I was young, I was very passionate and jumping on things. And Dad said, I'll just call now and then and we should talk about the weather. I'm like, the weather? Why would we talk about the weather? And then I finally, the point is just to see that you're alive and find out if things are okay. That's all I want to hear. I don't want to hear about your latest crazy crap you're into. but I would like to know if you're okay. And that is like that's what I learned to do with this handicapped guy. He would drive you crazy. And yet, rather than cutting off all contact, he needs people who can ride it,
Yes.
Anyway.
That's what I had to do with certain family members, and really just kind of steer the conversation in another direction when it goes there. Or, if we can't steer it in another direction, then that's time to end it until next time. I need to make sure that you're alive and okay.
Yeah. And I think a similar issue is when somebody in your family marries somebody you can't stand. You can't expect them to turn against that person or to get rid of that person. So you again have to sort of have some kind of limited degree of contact, or unless you want to keep cutting everybody off. My family is big at this. They would just cut people off. This is a big thing in Protestant Pennsylvania. There was all these people you'd never hear of. They said, oh, they did something bad 30 years ago. We never talked to them anymore. And I don't think that's healthy,
That my family is the same way. And it's actually really kind of devastating. And in a way, I don't know, life's so short. Life's too short for that is sort of my ethos,
Yeah, and I'm very crazy. Now this is one good thing. I have done almost every stupid thing that these people are doing, so I can't hate them for it. So I remember when I was that guy raving about something just like that. That helps,
It does help.
Like I said, there is wisdom in keeping your friends and keeping your family if that's important to you. But at the same time, know when to cut people off.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do have to cut people off, but it would be nice to have another option, because right now everybody is having to cut off half of everybody they know in America. And I don't think that can possibly be justified. It's not true that half the people are horrible monsters unworthy of even talking to. What is true is that half the people have currently been sucked into something crazy.
Well, and it does kind of pay to remember that divide and conquer is a thing. And there are people that have a vested interest in divisiveness because it's profitable for them.
Yeah. So, it's sort of like they're drug addicts. They've got a problem, and that might make it impossible to be friends with them, but it might not, Anyway.
Actually, before we go off on another topic, I will say that if you are one of those people who wants to convince your friend that they were wrong and that they shouldn't have done whatever, don't be antagonizing to them.
Yeah.
That is the one thing you don't do. You don't say, oh, if you want to be friends, then you gotta stop leaving. That's not what you do. You sympathize with them. You try to understand where they're coming from, and that's a good technique for converting people to your side. Is you start with things you have in common, and you start with your shared values, and then you move on from there.
Yep.
Yeah, I think also a big thing was hard for me to learn is that you'll never win. You don't convince them of something. You really shouldn't be your goal to dominate and control your friends, even if you think you're right. And the fact is they're on a different path. And
no, Sam, you absolutely can win. The problem is that you just can't win with logic.
I don't think you ever win. I think the point is, I think it's unwise to try to win with your friends.
Well, you don't try. I wouldn't say try to win, but but there are people out there that go into groups of try to reform former, KKK members and stuff. And they do have strategies and stuff that they use. But one thing that never works is you're never going to win an argument with facts and logic.
Of course,
okay.
Not in there for logic.
Yeah, but
for the feeling of belonging or something.
Right, yeah. But you can win if you show people compassion, you start with shared values. And if there's someone you kind of want to bring back into your fold, and into kind of a less extreme environment, they got caught up in a cult or something, then you, like I said, don't try to convince them with arguments. Don't try to tell them that they're wrong. Just do what you said, don't talk about politics at first, focus on shared values, focus on their values in particular, and then kind of work from there. Anyway.
Yeah. But I object to the whole concept of ever winning. I mean, the point is not that I have some truth and you need to buy my truth. Because I grew up among evangelical Christians, and they would go to people to try to convert them. And I thought a lot about this, and I realized this is disrespectful and morally wrong. It's like being a salesman making a sale. If that is your relationship with someone, then you're not their friend. You're exploiting.
Well, I mean, to some extent, but think about like cult deprogramming. You know what I mean? Like sometimes maybe your friend's part of a really harmful cult that maybe they're not fully into it, but it's hurting them. You know, I think in some ways, like approaching, you know, them from a compassionate perspective and trying to understand where they're coming from and help them see that there's another feasible way can be a positive thing.
I still kind of tie with the original. Maybe we need a little bit of distance, a little bit of separation to let some people cool off and then come back at them again on a different subject. Especially right now, as everybody's getting over the shenanigans that's been happening. I don't see that as a horrible thing to let some people go for a bit and then come back a little bit.
Yeah, Sam, I think there's a big difference between trying to convert people to your religion versus helping someone who found themselves in something like a hate group. Someone who is part of like the Proud Boys or the KKK, and you're trying to help them get out of that and kind of go on their own path. There's a big difference there.
I don't think there is, but I remember when I was on your side of it. But anyway, I think I think Biden's right. We need to lower the temperature. All of us need to have less anger towards each other.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm really glad to talk about and move in that direction. I think everybody is very, very inflamed and sore and angry about their position right now. And we all need to knock it off and start getting along again. Anyway, so Zoom has
this is kind of neat little side channel research that people have been doing, which I thought was pretty interesting. Out of was it University of Texas, I think? UT San Antonio, who's got a pretty good they've got a pretty good competition team themselves. But I thought this was pretty cool, that the way that you're typing and the way you're sitting, they were actually able to identify keyboard entries based on shoulder and upper arm movements, which I thought is crazy and also really cool.
Oh, yeah. I remember years ago, Berkeley did this. They can tell from the sound of the tapping what key you're playing.
Yes, and all these sorts of things really fascinate me, like the light patterns on the sound patterns on the potato chip bag and all that stuff, and the light bulb eavesdropping and stuff like that. I just think that's kind of neat. It's crazy too, the things that you just don't think about, because the way they did it was to analyze pixel shifts around their shoulders in relation to like compass directionals in order to do it. And I don't know. I just thought this was really cool.
Yeah, it reminds me of the science fiction standard, if you could tell if people are lying with a video of their face.
And I mean, their accuracy wasn't 100%, but it was like around 75% average, which is pretty impressive for this.
Yeah, and even up to 93 under some conditions. So, I mean, that does sound pretty awesome. Yeah, an interesting side channel.
Yeah.
And Red Team, Kubernetes.
Yeah, this is a cheat sheet. It helps you set up some Kubernetes clusters to attack. Good for practice.
It's got a logo. It must be important.
Yeah, right. It's a good practice environment.
Ooh,
It has right now it only has 2 labs, an ingress takeover and a secret bypass. But some practice is good, especially since there's a lot of Kubernetes clusters out and about.
So it's not just a cheat sheet, it's like a lab you can do.
Yeah.
Maybe I should figure out how to do it and throw it in my classes. Neat. Kubernetes is something I really want students to play with. There is something called Minikube you can set up pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they really need to get that in the classes. Anyway, and then we got government. Oh yeah, getting rid of
again. again. Yep. So the UK, the USA, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, India, and Japan are asking technology companies to add backdoors to their communication software, like iMessage, like Zoom. And it's to ease in their investigations and stuff. And so we're having this conversation again. And what's worrisome is that, you know, it's going to happen somewhere, right? Even if it doesn't happen in the USA, it's going to happen in like the UK. It's going to happen in Canada. And so when technology companies come out with these new products, they're going to have to comply with those laws off the back, even if they're not in, even if those laws don't apply to your country. So you might end up with software that by default, you know, will allow people to snoop, even if.
Well, you might, but I think the economic argument is very strong. I mean, if Canada had to make stuff without encryption, nobody would buy their stuff anymore.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, what would happen if iMessage, for example, if Canada said iMessage cannot have, you know, and needs to have a backdoor, you know, and Apple says, well, okay, we'll try to do what we can. We'll have a secret password and we'll change it if we think it leaks or whatever. And then, you know, they decide to just have one version of iMessage. Are people going to stop using iMessage? I don't think so.
Yeah, actually, what happened last time with the export-grade encryption is it was only used in other countries, but all the servers had to support it, and that created a downgrade attack.
Yeah,
So
I mean, there's a lot of.
I'm increasingly convinced that the cryptographers are right, that these laws just create poison in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is these, there's no evidence that these actually help solve crimes. The NSA had a program that looked at logs and texts made by like all Americans that they could get their hands on.
Yeah.
Thing cost like $100 million. And there was, they used it, I think, for like one investigation, and then that didn't lead to any arrests. And that was from 2015 to 2019. So $100 million just down the drain, and it doesn't really help. So.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong argument. I mean, that's the standard argument, and I resisted it for a while, but I'm beginning to be convinced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, all right. Any more comments?
No.
Hack all the planets, people.
Yes.
Right.
Stay warm.
Hey.
So you really got me. I'm going to have to get a ham radio license like you. I'm building an antenna like you. That talk about satellites was bloody awesome.
Yeah.
There's a lot of systems are going to do the same thing. It really looks awesome to like pick up satellite signals on your computer. I want to do it.
Yeah, there's just so much stuff in space, and especially because I didn't realize in recent years just how often, you know, you get high school students like just throwing stuff up in space, and now you have all these like little IoT devices floating around the planet.
Yeah.
So awesome.
So I definitely want to get a whole flood of projects out on that. I think everybody will love it.
Yeah.
Well, there are definitely ways to encode, you know, custom, you know, slow scan TV images, custom, you know, APT images and stuff, and then we can do projects. And like I said, I think I'll do like one a day, and just send it your way, and then you can slowly kind of add projects together.
Sure, and even the ones where you have to spend money and build an antenna, I think those will be hits too.
Oh,
Yeah. I am so excited to get to the point in my life where I can do this kind of tinkering again, because this kind of stuff is really exciting.
Yeah, you need to promote yourself and hire an assistant to do the drudgery. I did that like 15 years ago, and it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
If I was running a company, I would not take the creative researcher and make him do drudgery. So why am I doing this?
That's true. It's just been, you know, cash flow reasons for now, but it's coming eventually.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, I'll stop the recording.